This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
There are still many states in this country where people who were formerly incarcerated are not able to vote, which, I think is absurd. But frequently, whenever I brought this up on the radio, people point out, well, no, we can't allow all these felons to vote because they're just going to vote for people that are not going to prosecute crimes. Let all the criminals go free. And on the one hand, that kind of makes sense. But there is some new data out, a new survey done by the Marshall Project that shows a great deal of nuance behind the political views of the people that are currently incarcerated. We're not even talking about the people formerly incarcerated, but the people currently incarcerated. Here to help break that story down and a number of other stories related to the prison system and to the criminal justice system in general is my friend Domenick Crispino. He is a former attorney, an ex-convict, and a legal commentator who is currently at liberty after his most recent conviction was vacated. Domenick, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning, Frank. Nice to see you.
Domenick, I don't want to spend too much time on your case because it's complicated, but just give folks a little bit of a Reader's Digest version of what your career was like as an attorney and then how you ended up in prison.
I was a Georgetown law graduate. I worked for a small law firm. And for myself for about 10 years. I tried many cases. I made many precedents in sex
civil, criminal?
Some criminal, but mostly civil. Sex harassment. I had the biggest verdict in sex harassment in the early 90s, since surpassed 1 million times.
I bet.
Then I got in some trouble. I was also involved in politics, and I think I was a target, and I ended up doing 6 years. And then I came home, and I got involved in real estate. And a number of years later, I got in trouble again.
But now you're out. Your last
yes.
conviction was vacated.
It was vacated, yes.
Now, the one thing I know you in your second trial, you made the decision to represent yourself. And people may say, all right, an experienced attorney, they say you should never represent yourself. Maybe that's an instance of it makes sense to represent yourself because you know law, you know all the legal procedures, you know when to object and everything. But the fact that the court didn't give you a proper warning about the hazards of representing yourself is part of the reason that conviction got vacated. Explain that to folks. Why do you, an experienced attorney, need any sort of warning from the court about representing yourself?
Well, you're not taught the value of counsel. When you're an attorney, you're taught the nuts and bolts and how to think like an attorney. But that's a stop moment in a case where the court will say, hey, no matter what your experience is, no matter what you've done, you should take a step back now and understand the value of counsel. And here's the value of counsel. And they'll go through a litany. It's like a 20-minute discussion. Now, that may either change your mind or not change your mind. I was not given that option. And I learned that was a requirement. I didn't even know that was a requirement because I practiced law, but I never was in that kind of situation. And I might have hesitated at that point to fire my counsel.
So you did in all, about 11 years in prison?
Yeah.
So you were one of the folks that gave me your analysis of the best menu items in the various prisons, and we had a very diverse amount of folks writing in and saying their folks that what they had as their favorite, and a lot of people listening who are incarcerated right now all over the country, and I'm sure they're aspiring to be a radio guest sitting in that chair one of these days, and who knows, maybe they can. One of the questions that a caller brought up yesterday that I said that I would ask you, which I honestly don't know the answer to, is what precautions does the prison make, if any, if somebody's got a food allergy? If you're allergic to, I don't know, strawberries, nuts, whatever, what does the prison do to make sure you don't die?
The prison has something called special diets, which the medical staff will certify that, let's say you can't have soy or you can't, you're allergic to certain things, that you're served separately in the mess hall. And it could be very strict. It could be there could be kosher diets. There's a variety of stuff that can be done. So if you have a nut allergy, they'll protect you.
So they do. They do look out for you if you have an issue. Okay, well, that's encouraging to hear. By the way, let me ask you a question that another caller brought up yesterday. Caller brought up the poor diet that patients in nursing home facilities and rehab facilities have to endure. And basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically his question was, why should we care what prisoners eat? They got sent to prison for a reason. Why should anybody care, essentially, about their menu items, their diet? What would you say to that?
Well, and I agree in some sense. I mean, why should they care? But however, your entire body is in the care and custody of the state at that point, or the government, whatever the case may be. And, you're not sentenced to death and you're not sentenced to torture. So they have to give you at least a subsistence diet. And they do. It's not New York State has a set diet that they produce it in one facility and export it to all the other facilities where they can heat up stuff. The big claim 20 years ago was that they could feed you on $2 a day. And, I agree with that. It probably was $2 a day.
I bet.
Now, in many facilities, you also have access to stoves or hot pots you can buy. Some of them have refrigerators if they're medium security or minimum security, and you can actually cook yourself. And in many instances, I was in facilities where you could. So, you can also do your own thing and not go to the mess hall. And many don't go to the mess hall if they have that option.
If people have questions, by the way, about any of the cases that we're going to be talking about, or the prison system or the criminal justice system in general, folks are welcome to give us a call at 1-646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. All right. Let me ask you, this takes advantage of your expertise, having been incarcerated, but also your experience of having run for office as a Republican. You ran for both state assembly and community school board, right?
That's correct.
And so the Marshall Project, which people don't know, it's a news outlet that covers the criminal justice system. They recently did a survey, a political survey of people behind bars. And apparently this is a pretty serious survey. They interviewed more than 54,000 people in 785 facilities in 45 states. So this was not something only done in red states or only done in blue states. And the folks that they spoke to shared their thoughts on the election and the way that this election has been framed as between a cop and a convicted felon. Apparently, people in prison and jails are rarely asked for their political views, and a lot of folks jumped at the opportunity to participate in this. The oversight, as Marshall Project refers to it, reflects the misconception about people behind bars that they aren't interested in politics and that they are overwhelmingly supportive of Democrats. Before we get into what the survey shows, Dom, what was your experience about the level of care that people that you were incarcerated with had about politics? Did they care?
They did. And they a lot of opinions were out in the open. And my experience, at least in this last go-around, was that it was very similar to what the Marshall Project has shown. And that's not the first survey they've done. There have been Marshall Project surveys before, which have shown kind of the same thing. But this is a voluminous survey. I mean, very detailed. I mean, I actually would recommend the Marshall survey to do all our polling at this point.
All right, so here are the highlights of what they found. And as you alluded to, this is kind of a sequel to a similar one they did 4 years ago, which kind of had similar results. Most respondents that they spoke to, and again, these are not formerly incarcerated people. These are people currently in prison or jail. Most respondents said they would vote for Trump, and support was particularly strong among white men. A substantial minority of black men said they'd vote for Trump, too, if given the chance. Of the more than 54,000 survey respondents, 35% said they identify as independents. Half of the incarcerated independents said they lean towards neither party. The rest are about equally divided among Democrats and Republicans. Now, before we get into the rest of this, let's talk about those. As I alluded to, a lot of folks assume that a lot of the people in prison just want to be for Democrats because they're going to let everybody out of prison, or because a lot of folks in prison tend to be minority. That's not the case.
That's correct. It's not the case. Think about it. You have to live in a structure where there are people who've been convicted of crimes. Some of them some pretty bad characters. Most of them not. Most of them people who've gotten into situations, even if they've come back more than once, twice, three times. There's a core that's really bad, Frank, really bad. The baddest of the bad, you could say. So they understand that. They understand that that in many circumstances they've done something wrong and they're being punished. It's a big timeout prison. That's what it is, essentially. And they understand bad behavior. I mean, there's a hierarchy in prison of crimes. I mean, certain crimes are shunned more than others. For example, sexual crimes, child molesters being the worst of those. I mean, they have the hardest time in prison. So you don't have that kind of attitude if you have a general lawless attitude. Mm-hmm. There is some lawful parameters to these unlawful people.
A majority of those who identified as Democrats and independents said the country's ready for a woman president. Republicans are more divided on that. Although many of Trump's policies are tough on crime, some respondents resented Democrats' use of the stigmatizing label felon to denigrate Trump. Others were skeptical of Harris's background as a prosecutor, and many behind bars opposed incarceration for Trump, but opinions were divided across party lines. Domenick, that sounds almost exactly what the polling would be if you were to ask Democrats and Republicans not in prison.
That's 100% right, Frank. It's exactly what the polls show of non-incarcerated people. And you know what? What that shows me is that they're not different. They may have done something, or in some cases there are even innocent people in there. I mean, there's a segment of that as well, but they are in line with the population.
This comes as in Nebraska, they have just given convicted felons their right to vote after their incarceration. And over the last 20 years, we've seen about 2 million people in 26 states and the District of Columbia regain their right to vote, although there are a bunch of states where they still can't vote. There's no argument, I assume, from you that people, once they serve their prison sentence, should be able to vote again, right?
No, I agree with that. I mean, in New York State, used to be that if you were on supervision, you couldn't. But that's been changed. So the minute you are free, even if you're on parole or probation, you get your right to vote back. You just have to re-register.
Gotcha. Okay. And in terms of, this is a little bit more controversial, even from incarcerated people that I've spoken with. What about the idea of allowing people currently incarcerated who are convicted, about letting them vote while they're in prison? I know D.C., I think, is experimenting with this. There have been varying views on this from people who have served time in prison. What's your view?
Well, my view is the right to vote is fundamental in a democracy, and it never made any sense to me that you lose that upon a conviction. Even while you're incarcerated. Even while you're incarcerated. However, the fly in the ointment with that is that where do you vote? There's a substantial portion of the population that really, even though they're from a county or a certain place, they may not have an address there. So figuring out where they would be a voter might be a problem, and coming up with that kind of thing. Census-wise, an inmate is considered part of the county that they preside in.
When they're incarcerated or before conviction?
No, when they're incarcerated.
See, I thought they changed that. So right now, for census purposes, you're counted. If you're a prisoner if I live in New York City, but I'm sent to prison in Lewisburg,
right,
I'm counted as a resident of Lewisburg, even though I'm not really participating in the community there.
And some counties, that's just a drop in the bucket. And some of the rural counties in New York, it probably means more money for them because the county might have 50,000 people and you have 5,000 inmates, so you got a 10% bump in the population.
I mean, this is exactly why this was such a controversial thing in New York when New York was trying to decide. I think New York did change it to the last place you live, but I guess around the country there's still a big debate about that. All right, hang tight. Domenick Crispino is here. When we come back, when I ask about a criminal case that has gotten a lot of attention that has just kicked off today. It has to do with the case of the Marine veteran Daniel Penny, who killed someone on the train. A lot of people believe that he was protecting the folks on the train, but the Manhattan DA's office, they're going forward with the prosecution. I'm going to get Domenick Crispino's take on this straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel or that white chocolate mocha. Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
5 immersive worlds, 1 amazing theme park. Get ready to explore the all-new Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, Super Nintendo World, How to Train Your Dragon, Isle of Berk, and Dark Universe. Epic Universe, now open at Universal Orlando Resort. Our universe will never be the same. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Number 3030.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom, The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Yes, the great Bobby Fuller 4. Today would have been Bobby Fuller's birthday. Unfortunately, gone way too soon. I believe he was only 24 or 25 at the time that he passed away. But you really wonder how many other great songs he could have come up with had he just lived a bit longer. All right, my guest in studio is Domenick Crispino. He is a former attorney, an ex-convict, and a legal commentator. We're going to chew on some of the issues that are in the news these days. If you have questions or comments, you can give us a call at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. If you are currently incarcerated, you can absolutely request me to be on your approved email list. I don't know what various state systems use, but the federal system uses something called Core Links. And if you want to send me a request, I will absolutely accept it. You can email me at frank.morano, that's frank.morano, at redappleaudionetworks.com. You know, Dom, I mentioned that because I just got a request. I'm not going to say this person's name, but I just got a request from a police officer who, you know, got involved in some crimes, and he's currently incarcerated. And it leads me to think, how are cops who get caught up in something, maybe make some mistakes, that wind up in prison, how are they treated? Are they treated any better or worse than anybody else?
Well, obviously, if there are members of the population that don't like police officers, then there's a certain segment that don't.
I bet.
They would be, they wouldn't treat them well. Many police officers would be in a special housing unit. New York State, for high-profile inmates, has had something called APPU at Clinton Correctional Facility. The rapper Shine was there, for example, and a number of other, many cops who get convicted would go there if it's the state system. In the federal system, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure that there's some sort of way to look out. They don't just throw you into the wolves.
Well, what about lawyers? Did you have a line of people outside your cell wanting you to look at their cases?
Sure. I probably read. I estimate hundreds and hundreds of transcripts and paperwork, and it's an education. It's an education you couldn't get in a law school or out in the world because this is not something that people would do for pay, because these are usually post conviction. It's a situation where they're trying to they're behind the eight ball, because once you're convicted by a jury, the presumptions shift. There's no presumption of innocence anymore, which I think is totally wrong. The presumption of innocence should ride through at every point.
Well, how can that be? After you're convicted, why should you have a presumption of innocence?
Well, yeah, because the presumption of innocence is not taken seriously. There's actually a presumption of guilt, Frank.
That's true. I mean, that's why, Judge Saul Wackler, who listens to this show pretty regularly, everyone always cites his a grand jury could indict a ham sandwich line, but he said that in the context of basically wanting to do away with grand juries, because being indicted is what he told me is a heavy, heavy burden that's very difficult to outrun.
Yeah. There's a quote, I forget who it comes from, is the power to indict is the power to destroy. And it's exactly correct. And the grand jury is the plaything of the prosecutor.
Yeah, let me ask you about a jury selection that just began yesterday in New York City. The jury selection began in the case of Daniel Penny. There were protesters out there jeering at Daniel Penny on the first day of jury selection. How difficult is it to get an unbiased jury in a case like this?
Oh, it's got to be very difficult.
Especially in a place like Manhattan, I would think.
That's correct. You have people with certain views of the police, people with certain views of homeless, or shall I call them unhoused people?
You can still say homeless. It's okay.
There's people who believe there's a racial angle to it. I don't know. I don't know Daniel Penny. Seemed to be a pretty straight shooter to me, except that he seemed a little gung-ho. And that could be the problem here. To get an unbiased jury is difficult in every case, if you think about it.
But I would think in a particularly high-profile case, especially with a racial component, and especially in a place like Manhattan, maybe it's more difficult.
They had the prospective jurors had to have heard about this case for sure.
No, I'm absolutely sure. At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Domenick Crispino. Here was Daniel Penny speaking out in a video explaining his side of the story in terms of what happened.
And he was yelling, so I took my headphones out to hear what he was yelling. And the three main threats that he repeated over and over was, I'm going to kill you, I'm prepared to go to jail for life, and I'm willing to die. I was scared for myself, but I looked around. I saw women and children. He was yelling in their faces, saying these threats. I couldn't just sit still. And then some people say that this was about race, which is absolutely ridiculous. I didn't see a black man threatening passengers. I saw a man threatening passengers, a lot of whom were people of color. The man who helped restrain Mr. Neely was a person of color. And I acted in a way that would protect the other passengers, protect myself, and protect Mr. Neely. I used this hold to restrain him, and I did this by leaving my hand on top of his head to control his body. You can see in the video there's a clear rise and fall of his chest, indicating that he was still breathing. And I'm calibrating my grip based on the force that he's exerting.
One of those people that was saying it was all about race was Hawk Newsome from Black Lives Matter. Hawk Newsome was one of those protesters out there yesterday who were calling Penny a white supremacist.
Yeah. The man that killed Jordan Neely has to turn himself in. Let me explain something to y'all. We were the first group in this country to demand that the mayor prosecute the man who killed Jordan Neely. You know him, the Michael Jackson impersonator that was strangled on the train and the police let his killer go. We were the first group to demand justice. We took to the streets. We kept the pressure on. We've been outside this district attorney's office right here all day and said we ain't leaving until they prosecute this man. And guess what? They are prosecuting Daniel Penny. So tonight, we gonna be out here partying. We got food coming, we need a DJ, we need some music. It's up because people power works. To everybody who said, nah, y'all shouldn't be protesting doing this, you. This work. You need to get in the streets. Pressure works.
And while Hawk Newsome was out there yesterday, that's actually from when Daniel Penny was first arrested, not from yesterday. But I think the sentiment remains the same. What about the racial component in this, Dom? Do you think you'll have a situation where, irrespective of what the evidence shows, that you'll have minority jurors or white jurors refuse or be certain to convict no matter what?
I mean, it's entirely possible, and the system is supposed to sift that out. I mean, the jury voir dire is designed to sift that out. The questions from the judge, the pedigree questions to kind of just set that up, and the questions from counsel are supposed to get that out into the open and uncover that. Obviously, people can hide that, or they can get off jury duty by just making it explicit. I look at the case, and there's a fair chance of conviction, even if you factor out race here. I've always felt that this Daniel Penny character, for lack of a better word, the military guy, the gung-ho guy, the guy who leaps to the aid of others, sometimes is a bit overzealous. And I read between the lines of this description, and I see there's a possibility, actually a strong possibility, he may be convicted. Even if you factored out race. Yes.
Now, we've all been on the subway, and those of us that are New Yorkers, and seen someone that's mentally disturbed. And I think there's been many instances, especially if you're with a child or, a woman, where you're concerned and there's an element of being scared. If someone's actually being vocal and saying that he doesn't care about going to jail or anything like that, if you're a juror that's ridden the subway before, how do you not say, all right, by the way, if people are just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. But if you're a juror that's ridden the subway before, how do you not say, all right, there's no way I'm convicting this guy for dealing with somebody that we've all seen on the train and found threatening?
Right. I get that. I mean, but you also have the hardened New Yorkers who understand that there's a lot of this that goes on, and most of it is harmless. There's performers, there's gang members who are on subway cars. I mean, and it's it's almost a fact of life in New York. So it really, I guess, it depends on what kind of hardened New Yorker you get on the jury. I don't know. Maybe there aren't hardened New Yorkers anymore in New York.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. Another case that obviously had all sorts of racial implications is the Central Park Five. Obviously, the Central Park Five, they went to prison for the assault and rape of the Central Park jogger. The Central Park jogger has no memory of the incident, no memory of who attacked her at all. They were in prison for a long time. Ultimately, they were exonerated. And Oprah and others have said they should be known as the Exonerated Five. One of those Exonerated Five, Yusef Salaam, was actually elected to the New York City Council last year, and actually spoke at the Democratic National Convention this year. President Trump has still been speaking out about the Central Park Five. At the time, very famously, he took out ads talking about how crime was out of control, saying we need to bring back the death penalty in New York. He even mentioned the Central Park Five in the ABC debate on September 10th. Here was what President Trump said at the time.
People, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt the person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty.
Now, apparently, they never pled guilty, and now they are suing President Trump, I believe, for defamation, maybe for other things as well. They're saying through their attorney that they need to rebuild their whole reputation once again. What's your view on this lawsuit of the Central Park Five versus Trump?
It's frivolous. It's a frivolous lawsuit. They're going to say that Donald Trump saying something that's wrong during a debate has damaged their reputation. I mean, that's an incredible statement on its face. Mm-hmm. Second of all, Trump obviously misspoke. He misspoke saying that they pled guilty. What he meant was they confessed, and they did in fact confess. Right. The problem was the confession was coerced. I mean, it's controversial whether or not it's coerced or not. But the police tactics were questionable. The DA's tactics were questionable as well. But it was a confession. So to that extent, what Trump is saying is true-ish, if not true. But they didn't plead guilty.
Where was this lawsuit filed? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the same question, if it's in New York, does this create a situation where if there's likely to be a Trump-hating jury, maybe they convict him or at least fine against him for being Donald Trump rather than for actual defamation? Is that a possibility?
Well, listen, this case shouldn't even get to a jury. It should be thrown out. I mean, there's no what's the damage? What's the damage here to the reputation? Are they going to, I believe, that Yusef Salaam, I guess he was, he pled guilty. No, but we all know. They wrote a book. There was a documentary. I mean, they recovered money. I mean, at this point, what is Donald Trump saying that prove?
Yeah. Hey, speaking of Trump, obviously he has his criminal conviction in the Manhattan DA's office. I believe was that where your first criminal conviction was?
That's correct. Yes.
So you have some experience in Manhattan as well. I know that's not necessarily going to be adjudicated, the appeals process, until after the election. Where do you see that playing out? Is that a case that you could see A, ending in jail time, or B, being vacated on appeal?
Well, I mean, there's a real possibility of jail time, just given the attitude towards Trump
from the judge.
Yeah, from the judge. Yes, and Trump doesn't help himself. Hasn't shown the court proper respect. Ultimately, I think the case. I always believe the case should have been thrown out at the outset from the statute of limitations. I think they got that fact that they're beyond 5 years, but he was out of the state. I don't think that's what it was meant for. I think it meant for if you absented yourself from the state. He didn't. He still had presence in the state. So if the appellate division actually looked at it, I think that they should toss it out on that ground. There's a lot of problems with that conviction. Now with the Supreme Court weighing in on the immunity, they relied on evidence that was immune. So technically the judge would have to parse through all the evidence and show that there's harmless error from that. I could see where an appellate court might just say, hey, listen, you got to retry this thing without that.
One of the other cases that got a lot of attention and in some ways was an even bigger deal was the civil case that Letitia James brought, which had a record penalty in terms of a civil judgment, not just in New York, but I think in any court anywhere in the country. That's now out on appeal. I know you practice civil law. How do you see that one playing out?
That one, in my opinion, has a 0% chance of being affirmed. First of all, it's a fraud-based conviction. And the definition of fraud in any state is that there must be damage. In this case, you had the bankers saying there was no damage. Basically, the bankers said, listen, we know Trump inflates value. They all do. Everybody, if they didn't really, it's a game.
Right.
My property's worth $1 billion. The bank says, all right, we'll give you $250 million. And you say, okay. So valuation is subjective. I forget who it was. Was it Cuban or one of the other guys on the Shark Show?
Shark Tank. Right.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Saying that everybody in real estate should leave the state if that president's going to stay. And I agree with them. Everybody in real estate is a blowhard. Everybody, and especially in New York, everybody is promoting
You're
themselves.
a salesman. You're a promoter, right?
Yeah, that's what they do here. And Trump was the biggest one of them all.
But what about, now I certainly agree, but what about the kind of the argument that by misrepresenting the value of these properties, he was able to get loans or get money that he wouldn't have otherwise been entitled to?
Well, let's put it this way. He was going to get the loan because he had substantial assets. And the bank did their own valuation. So the bank knew exactly what they were getting into. See, now if the bank later on said, hey, wait a minute, you said it was worth $1 billion and we gave you $2 billion, different story. Or we gave you $500 million. But they were giving him fractions of what he wanted. He wasn't he wasn't like leveraging himself 100%. He was leveraging himself a certain percentage.
So if you're betting, you think the appellate division throws this civil conviction out?
Yeah, and I bet you the real estate industry is like egging him on.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, do you know the timeline for that, when that gets heard by the appellate division?
I think they had the argument already.
Okay.
So there may be a decision. The appellate division, usually within 60 days, 90 days. I mean, a complicated case, it could be longer. So you may have a decision by the end of the year on that.
Interesting. All right. By the way, just before we move on from Trump, the other federal cases involving him, I know you referenced that Supreme Court immunity decision, but the other federal cases, the documents case and the election interference case having to do with January 6th, do you see those going anywhere? Let's say he loses the election. Obviously, if he wins the election, it's not going anywhere. But let's say he loses the election.
Well, the one in Washington, D.C., he's in a heap of trouble there.
The election interference case.
Yes. Because what they're doing is they're building the prosecution around the immunity decision, so they can sift that out pre-trial, and then go to trial. And I Trump puts his foot in his mouth, and there's so much evidence with that. That one is the one that he should really worry about.
Interesting. All right. Dom Crispino is here. If you have questions, we have 3 open lines. They're all yours if you want them. 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. When we come back, I want to talk about this case out of Texas where the death penalty is on hold for this gentleman that was initially convicted of killing his child through shaken baby syndrome. If this goes forward, this would be the first execution ever of someone killing their child through shaken baby syndrome. We'll see how that goes. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Frank Morano here with Dom Crispino. We'll continue straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight.
Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Ray Dalio, legendary investor and New York Times best-selling author, wants to pass along his understanding of how countries go broke, because he believes the U.S. budget and debt situation needs to be addressed. To give you that knowledge, he has put the draft of his book, How Countries Go Broke, The Big Cycle, online for free. It's available now at economicprinciples.org.
In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
I ain't asking for much.
46 minutes after the hour. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano here with Domenick Crispino, chatting about some of the legal cases in the news. If you have a question or a comment, you can call in at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. Let us say hello to E. Frank in Astoria. You may not know this, Dom, but E. Frank is actually either a current or former auxiliary police officer. So I expect a very well-informed question on this one. Hello there, E. Frank.
Yes, good evening, Frank. I'm a former auxiliary police officer. Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
My log file is at
auxiliary
police section headquarters in Kew Gardens, Queens.
All right,
Frank,
what's your question? Yep.
There was a time when there was a call screener you had. Maybe you might not remember her, Molly Frachter. And she called Mayor Adams a crook. And you told her, oh, well, we're going to have attorneys looking into this from WABC. She might be sued. Is there a situation right now where she is still in a legal situation against Mayor Eric Adams?
I believe so. They're in court right now. They're in the middle of depositions on that case, and she's trying to have that case thrown out and dismissed. All right, Dom, since E. Frank brought up the case with the mayor, where do you see that case going? Have you looked at that indictment at all? This is the first sitting mayor ever to be charged with a felony. Not the first corrupt mayor that New York has had.
They usually resign before it gets to that point.
Where do you see that case going?
Some of the charges I think will be tossed. Maybe the robbery charge might not hold water, and he's right. Maybe trying to dismiss it. But it's a tough road. It's a tough road. I mean, if in fact it's an insider who's right there, I mean, the whole case will fall and rise on the insider and the documentary evidence that backs it up. We don't know what that is, but it does not look good. That's my sense right now. It does not look very good for him.
Yeah, I know he's asking for a speedy trial, which is usually kind of unusual for a high-profile defendant. Usually they try and kick the can down the road as long as possible. Given the fact that both he and the prosecutors seem to want this case to go forward right away, when do we think that case is going to begin?
Well, technically, I think you demand a speedy trial. I forget if it's 60 or 90 days, but I think they're going to do a superseding indictment, and that'll reset the clock. My best guess, if everybody is on board with a speedy trial, You might be looking at sometime in the winter or maybe the spring at the latest. Obviously, he wants to do that before a primary. Primary would be what? June. So, if he can get himself a verdict in February or March, it's either June he'd be in the primary or perhaps going off to,
right, upstate. All right, let me ask you about another case that's gotten a lot of attention. We've talked about it a great deal on this show, and that's the case of Robert Roberson, a Texas death row prisoner who was hours away from execution last week. Apparently, yesterday he appeared for a legislative hearing. The subpoena forcing him to appear spared his life last Thursday. There's this bipartisan group of legislators who took the step amidst growing concerns that Roberson was wrongfully convicted. The Texas Tribune took a look at this case. That they're reporting that a closer look at the latest race to spare him from execution. CNN has reported that Texas has a law making it easier for defendants to challenge conviction later deemed junk science, which apparently they're claiming this conviction may have been. I'm sure you've paid a little bit of attention to this case. What's your read on this one?
My read on it is that it is based on junk science. I mean, just the from the reports of the case. Obviously, I haven't read the transcripts, but if the press reports are accurate, and some of these news outlets are very, very good, it is a junk science case. And there's a lot of junk science cases with regard to deaths of infants. The shaken baby cases, the brittle bones cases. There's a stream of them. Actually, and yesterday there was an argument in front of the New Jersey Supreme Court on this very issue. The New Jersey Supreme Court is hearing an appeal on whether or not there should be an outright ban on any of this this type of evidence.
The shaken baby syndrome evidence?
Yeah, shaken baby evidence. Yes, I think I forget the name of the case.
So if what could happen with Roberson? Obviously, the governor has the ability to commute his sentence and make sure he doesn't get sentenced to death. But could they vacate his conviction? Who would do the vacating? I understand he's already been through the appeals process. So where does that leave somebody like this?
He would have to file a post-conviction motion to try to get back in the system. I'm not sure if that's been exhausted at this point. The problem is, once you've had a bite of the apple and you're denied, and the presumptions change. Remember I mentioned the presumption before? All the inferences are against you at that point, and you have to now positively prove what you're trying to prove. It's a tough road. I mean, look at the case of the guy in Oklahoma, where the Oklahoma, it was in front of the Supreme Court recently. Oklahoma Attorney General, the most conservative of conservatives, told the court they believe that the guy is innocent, but there's no process in the state for allowing it.
How can that be?
Because these laws are written in such a way that, see, the law in many states protects the finality of convictions. Once you've been through the process, the conviction is deemed final. And once you've gone to the highest court in the state, it's a final. And once it's final, now you now become the prosecutor of your position. And you have the burden to show these things. And a lot of this stuff, some of these states have time limits on that. So if you discover it 5 years later, there's might be a 1-year time limit. It's pretty scary, actually, that there are actually probably a fair amount of innocent people who've been convicted and executed.
No, I mean, that's frightening. That's deplorable. 646-720-0635. Melvin is in the Bronx. What's your question, Melvin?
The question is very simple. Those who get the lessons of the past are doomed to repeat mistakes in the future. Federal court ruled in the 1960s that the Jews community are entitled to a diet of their children. That's why they get kosher meals, and every other state followed the same bill. And as far as we talk about the mayor of the city of New York, he has a right to defend himself.
Yeah, well, nobody's saying that he doesn't.
That is not a commission.
Yeah, thank you, Melvin. Anything you want to add there at all, Dom? I'm not sure.
No, I mean, obviously he's going to get his day in court. And I wish him well.
You know, one of the articles that was published, I guess, Wednesday or Thursday of last week said that the Adams legal strategy is all about hoping Trump wins at this point, and that Trump puts in a U.S. attorney and an attorney general that are much more sympathetic to his situation. Now, that night or the next night at the Al Smith dinner, President Trump in his remarks was effusive in his praise for Eric Adams, saying to him twice at two separate times, "You'll win in the end." He was nicer to Adams than almost every other politician that he talked about or introduced. I mean, how would you handicap that aspect, kind of the Trump card aspect of the Adams case?
Just like knowing Donald Trump a little bit, I think there's a good chance that that's going to happen. The problem is he'd be dead in the primary right after that.
Well, but if the choice, if you're Eric Adams, if the choice is prison losing an election, I think you take losing the election.
Of course, of course, and then you can try to spin it as best you can. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we'll see where that goes. It's certainly going to be an interesting election. 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. I don't know if you heard the discussion Dominic Carter and I had earlier about the hazing incident at James Madison High School. I know you're a Brooklyn guy originally. What'd you make of that? Do you think the charges there are warranted, or do you think that's an instance of a prosecutor going a little too crazy?
I mean, listen, maybe you discipline the kids, but I don't know. The DA's office, it's the DA's office, I assume, getting involved.
That's my understanding.
That seems a little extreme. I mean, you should see prison hazing.
I can imagine.
The gangs. Ooh.
Yeah. No, I can. I can definitely imagine. How would you describe the gang culture in prison? I mean, what goes on, and how are these gangs able to operate with impunity, where apparently there's still a lot of illegal stuff going on even behind prison? How does that happen?
In some facilities, the gangs essentially run them. And in others they don't, but they're a presence. It depends, but there's always gang activity. There's always some stabbings. There's always somebody getting initiated where they got to do something.
So what would you do about that? If they made you, I don't know, the head of the Bureau of Prisons, an agency which has had all sorts of problems. We recently saw how they allowed Jeffrey Epstein to kill himself, if that's what happened. We saw how they allowed Whitey Bulger to be murdered, and a lot of other instances. We could spend the whole day just listing the problems with the BOP. If you were put in charge of the BOP, what would you do?
The kind of job I would get.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What would you do?
That's a great question. I think what you got to do is you have to get to the core of who's running the gangs. You have to have intelligence on this. There's shot callers in every jail. Matter of fact, I right before my case was reversed, I actually roomed with the guy who was the head blood in that facility. It's this is easy to find out, and they all know. And I think what you got to do is you got to kind of put clamps on that kind of guy, and go from there. I mean, it doesn't run without the head.
All right, in the last minute we have here, let's try and get in another quick call or two. Stephen is in New Jersey. Quick comment if you have one.
Quick, I'd like to know, after doing many years of incarceration, what do you think is the heart of a prison?
The heart of a prison?
Oh, the heart of a prison? I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, the most important part, the most important function, the procedure, whatever you want to call it. What's the most important part that everyone thinks about all day, every day?
Well, I mean, everybody thinks about getting out, but I think that the most important thing in a prison is adequate recreation, and I think adequate contact with the outside world. I think
I disagree with that. The outside world makes you miserable because you're not there. I think it's the kitchen.
But it humanizes you.
Stephen, thank you. Appreciate that. Dom Crispino, thank you. Let's do this again soon.
Absolutely, Frank. Thank you.
All right. You can find Domenick Crispino really just here on this radio show. He's our legal analyst exclusively, but we'll have him back soon. Keep asking questions.